Hello, greetings. Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Happy to be here with you. I want to talk today about the latest facelift that's been given to the UFO cover-up. We're in the middle of seeing one now. It's not the first time. They've happened periodically in the past. I'll talk a little bit about that. But to keep it to the contemporary era, I mean, a couple of years ago when, lots of new confirmations and revelations about UFOs and UAP were happening. One person with, I think it's fair to say, some decent inside information and knowledge said to me in the midst of all of these revelations, he said, well, that's just a little more toothpaste out of the tube. I thought it was a pretty apropos statement. I've used it a number of times on my website in talking about some of the information that has come out. We're talking basically from 2017 to, my opinion, really around 2020, a little bit into 2021, where some interesting bits and pieces of UFO data were coming out to the public. So think about some of the revelations that came out during that time. Now, I mean, to folks who've been long studying the UFO subject, not much of that was new. Maybe none of that was actually new or shocking. But keep in mind, none of that information was even remotely acknowledged before 2017. I got a couple of pretty basic slides here. I'll just show you. So this is some of the information that was coming out in 2017, 2018. So just take a look. You've got, of course, the big TTSA press conference that initiated a lot of the new information coming out. That was October 2017. Then you get the New York Times articles that told the world about the Tic Tac UFO. It was a significant development. The fact that there was this program called ATIP. Holy cow, people were like, what? The Pentagon actually has a UFO program? That was a big revelation. People were very, very worked up over that, and understandably so. And it kept coming. There was the fact that through the ATIP program, there were a bunch of scientific papers that were created, dealing with some very advanced, kind of cutting-edge scientific issues. There was, yes, the UFO UAP report that the organization BASS, that's Robert Bigelow's aerospace organization, released and created. Hal Puthoff in June of 2018 gave an unbelievably fascinating lecture for the Society of Scientific Exploration, SSE, on the now kind of famous, infamous metamaterial. New York Times gets more articles. It's Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal yet again in May of 2019 with a very powerful piece on the USS Roosevelt and their encounters off the U.S. East Coast. Same month, May of 2019, the U.S. Navy released new guidelines on how they deal with UAP encounters, and it kept going through the rest of 2019. You have Lou Elizondo on Tucker Carlson at the very end of May, literally stating that there have been acquisitions by the United States military, U.S. government, of alien craft. I mean, he essentially stated that there were UFO crash retrievals right on a national, totally mainstream television program. I don't think that had ever happened before. That was a big thing. A few weeks later, you get the leak of the Davis Wilson notes. I've been talking about that quite a bit. Cannot believe that even to this day, there are some people with their heads, so far up their ass, they're never going to see the light of day on this. But those documents have, I think, been conclusively shown to any reasonable mind that those are a genuine leak of a very interesting conversation. And I'll leave it at that for now. Later in 2019, you have the Pentagon, basically the Navy, acknowledging those original UFO videos. You're talking about the Tic Tac video, the gimbal video, the Go Fast video, which actually they had not acknowledged as legit up to that point. In June of 2020, Donald Trump, still president, said, yes, I've heard interesting things about UFOs. And I think Roswell, he's talking to his son, Don Jr. Later that summer was maybe, I mean, in some ways, an article that I think disappointed a few people who were really expecting a lot more out of it. But nonetheless, that article in July of 2020 is Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal yet again in the New York Times with an article that referenced people like Dr. Eric Davis and really almost didn't quite exactly, but came very, very close to an acknowledgement of UFO crash retrievals, which I've always considered a major red line of disclosure. Later that year, you get the announcement of the UAP task force. And there's more. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But if you go through, from 2017 to 2020, just stop and consider. And that's only a skimming of the surface. There was more information than even those, let's say, bombshells. A lot of them really were bombshells that came out at that particular time. None of those things, I don't think, were conceivable in the minds of most people prior to 2017. Let's just get real about it. And that trend continued slightly into the early part of 2021. Let me just go on to the next. I have this. Here we go. So you've got, I think the biggest one of them is probably the New Yorker article where you've got them talking to Harry Reid, and he's talking about Lockheed and UFO secrecy. If you recall, Harry Reid, he's no longer alive, but had to walk that back on Twitter the next day or the day after that and said, no, I wasn't saying that Lockheed is involved in UFO secrecy, but no, he was. And I don't really think there's any other way to interpret that. More leaked UFO images video, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, more articles on the U.S. Navy encounters with UAP. So there was more information that was coming out. And then, of course, all of that led up to the UAP task force report of June 2021. And I think, to call that a denouement is an understatement. I don't think anyone was really expecting it to blow the lid off of UFO secrecy, but come on, 9 pages, really basically 6 pages if you're just looking at the text, the content. There's nothing in there. The Navy copped to, I think, 144 UAP events over the past, they didn't really say, but we're assuming 20 years. None of them were described. And I mean, it was just, there was a lot of hype that led up to that report. I'm sure if you're following the UFO subject, you probably remember it wasn't that long ago. There were even some rumors ahead of time that maybe there was going to be some heavy duty information there. But of course, we got nothing. For the record, I have my own personal database of U.S. military UFO encounters of the 21st century, working on all of it for the next volume of UFOs and the national security state. Just what I've collected of military cases, I've got well over 400 U.S. military UFO cases of this century. That's just of the last, 22 years. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's even much more than that. I'll need to do another fresh tally, and I'm still bringing more in. But anyway, so what we got with the UAP task force was a whole lot of nothing. Now they did, of course, we've got the congressional hearings from 2022 where they come back. I'll have a little bit more to say on it, but it is true that they said, well, now we've got about 400 that we've collected. Again, they told us nothing about these all Navy, these Navy plus Air Force. Where is the Air Force in this whole thing? By the way, they've been pretty much AWOL. I think that's what Chris Mellon wrote in an article earlier in the year. And he's right. Air Force has been AWOL on all of this. But anyways, the Pentagon folks said that there were 400 cases. And I'm like, okay, now you're getting close to what one researcher, me, has collected on my own over the last 20 years. I don't have access to all the classified stuff that they've got. And of course, they told us nothing about those cases, or very little. So, a whole lot of nothing. I mean, okay, so there was an admission that there are UAP. They did that in the task force report last year. They did it again this year. But yeah, no, it was pretty much a whole lot of nothing. Now, long before, for quite a while, actually, I have been speculating on this channel and also on my website that at some point, even in 2017 and 2018, when people were very excited, I said, look, at some point, there is very likely going to be a significant effort to start forcing that toothpaste back into the tube. It's not easy to put toothpaste back in a tube, but if you're very patient and very careful, you can get some of it back in there. And I do think that that is happening here with the UFO subject, the UAP subject. So from, let's just say, a high point, my estimation, we'll say the summer of 2020, that was the last article in the New York Times written by Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal. That was where you did get a near admission of genuine UFO crash retrievals. That's 2 years ago. That may not sound like a lot. Anyone in the UFO field is thinking, oh, big deal. But keep in mind, that's the New York Times. That is a significant step for our highly, tightly controlled establishment narrative. That the New York Times essentially is probably still the most prestigious voice in the establishment narrative. So from that point, 2 years ago, from that, we end up with the really laughable UAP congressional hearing that we just saw 2 months ago. And let me talk a little bit more about that here. So relating to that, that's May of 2022. I did a video on that the same day. By all means, check it out. But, you know, there were some people trying to put a positive spin on all of that. And I just, you know what? That hearing from 2 months ago could have been done almost verbatim in 1952, 70 years ago. In fact, that hearing was essentially done 70 years ago, because that was when the 4-star U.S. Air Force General John Alexander Samford held a press conference in the aftermath of the famous Washington, D.C. UFO flyovers, which, by the way, if anyone is paying attention, those UFO sightings started on July 19th, 1952. That is exactly 70 years ago today. We're seeing the 70th anniversary of the beginning of that whole craziness. So I'd like you to think about something here. Here we are now, here in 2022. We've gone back to the point of the 1950s in terms of government openness on UFOs. We've actually gone back, because really what General Samford said in that press conference, he gave some acknowledgement to those UFO reports. He called them, credible reports credible reports of relatively incredible things. And he also stated that, in his opinion, these did not involve any significant or national security concerns. His job was essentially to tell the media, we've got this under control. Then, of course, he gave essentially lies about what actually happened over DC, talking about weather phenomena, temperature inversions. All of that was nonsense. And all the air traffic controllers knew it. But essentially what he did is he gave some acknowledgement to UFOs, but also said, whatever it is, this is nothing that you need to be worried about. We've got this. That was Samford's message 70 years ago. That was exactly the message that we got 2 months ago at the UAP congressional hearings. It's a crazy thing. When I wrote my first volume of UFOs in the national security state, I was in the middle of that like 25 years ago. It was a given that the 1950s were a period of great repression over the subject of UFOs, at least by the United States government. It was absolutely one of the main themes of my book, and not just my book. Other UFO researchers clearly had gone through this over and over again. 1950s, lying and deception by the U.S. government on UFOs. So think about how bad things have gotten in our modern society of the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, in which the subject of UFOs, all right, was effectively banished from official discourse for decades. I mean, all through the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, right up until really just the last couple of years, the United States government made zero acknowledgement over the reality of UFOs in any way. You're talking about 50 years, nada, nothing. So we get some revelations starting in 2017, and we get to the level of admission that we were already at 70 years ago. And, honestly, I'm not sure if we've even reached that level quite yet. And in some ways, we haven't reached it. After all, General Samford, at the time, he was head of Air Force intelligence. He had 4 stars. He later became director of the NSA. He was a high-level guy talking about this subject. And we haven't had anyone of that level of stature in the United States government making a similar statement. Now, on the other hand, to be fair, we have gotten official statements from the United States Navy, at least, in confirmation of some extraordinary UFO or UAP encounters. We got the now famous Tic Tac event, the incredible events concerned with the USS Roosevelt, and quite a few others. But you're not getting high-level government people talking about these. So I would say, in essentials, we are back, roughly speaking, to where we were already at 70 years ago. Just makes you shake your head sometimes, honestly. But now even these admissions that we have gotten to here in the 21st century, I think there is a very good likelihood that we are seeing a walking back from the precipice. The precipice being essentially an acknowledgement of crash retrievals and beyond. So, and again, I've been saying this many times now. I think, and everything that we're seeing now is strengthening my long-held belief. Again, also something I've said many times, that what we saw in 2017, 2018, 2019 was the result of a certain faction, an establishment-oriented faction, to be sure, right? And a faction that basically supports the standard defense establishment talking points on pretty much everything, but a faction nevertheless. And that faction has pushed the public conversation to the brink of things like UFO crash retrievals. And in fact, they've already made a couple of those statements to that effect. You had Lou Elizondo back on May 31st, 2019, telling Tucker Carlson on national TV that, yes, we've recovered some of these. And in fact, Elizondo just did it again recently when he said, I just saw this, a 2-3 minute clip, talking about, yes, the aliens, they're here, I think he said. He didn't say the aliens are here, but he basically explicitly said they're here. And that was just in the process of some other podcast he was doing. These are significant statements, particularly I think what he said on Fox a couple of years ago. It's a huge thing. It's gotten no follow-up from any established media source or political leaders or anything. Ask yourself why. Why do you think there's been no follow-up? If this was an op, which we've heard from many, many people many times, then why has nothing been followed up regarding those statements? Why? Are these statements truly being made on behalf of the United States government and the United States intelligence community, or is this the result of a dedicated faction? Something that I have documented many times in the history of the UFO cover-up, going back, 80 years essentially. There've always been factions within the UFO community and within the military and within the intelligence community. We know about this. They've been written about many times, documented. That not everyone has the exact same opinion on what to do relating to the UFO situation. That has always been the reality. Why should it be any different here? Again, there's never been any follow-up from the establishment to any of these dramatic statements. And in fact, anytime one of these people strays too far, think about Harry Reid when he talked about Lockheed for the New Yorker article, they have to walk it back. Harry Reid was on Twitter the next day or the day after that saying, no, that's not true. It's not Lockheed. Lockheed's not involved in this. So again, I'm going to ask you to consider, are we talking about an actual op or is this a faction that is, there's back and forth going on here? So I've been saying for a long time it's a faction. And yes, again, a highly establishment-oriented faction. These people are not revolutionaries. They're not trying to take down the system. That is not their thing. And, maybe for that reason, that very obvious reason, some people accuse them of working for a covert agenda. What would the agenda be? If talking about UFOs to the public, why would that be a good thing? Why? Why would admitting to a massive cover-up be a good thing for the intelligence community? I've never gotten an answer from that. The only one that you ever hear is, well, they're trying to scare up the public about aliens. So they're going to false flag you. They're going to generate money for the military, create a global dictatorship, despite the fact that that's already happening without needing aliens for that. We're seeing the creation of a global revolution right now, and no one's talking about aliens or UFOs in the context of that. They don't need it. All right. So you've got to remember to acknowledge a UFO reality and an alien reality involves a serious trade-off. This is not just a freebie for the national security state. If you're going to recognize that there are aliens, all right, there's a price that has to be paid. Yes, okay, you can perhaps justify more defense spending if you tell the public, run for the hills, there's aliens here. Sure. Or you can even, you have to be careful here though, to some lesser degree, some subtle manner of scare up the public about aliens. But you got to be careful on that, because if you go too far, you're going to have to do some serious acrobatics in continuing to deny your previous culpability in the cover-up and everything that that entails. And I think that alone is probably just not going to be worth it. And secondly, if you acknowledge that, in other words, if there's an official acknowledgement that aliens are here, what if there is not a damn thing you can do about it? How exactly are you going to sell the idea of the new weapon systems against aliens without giving up some serious information about the aliens themselves? Do you think that the military, the intel community is prepared to do that? I don't think they are. I hear some people out there talking like this, and I really wonder, do they understand what they're talking about? If the plan is to terrify you, then why has it failed so utterly? It's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. All right. No one's running around scared of aliens. And in fact, what the establishment has done is they've given the exact opposite message. They've given the opposite message, which is, we've got this. And by the way, it's no aliens, nothing to worry about. This was the exact message that the Pentagon spokespersons 2 months ago at the hearings had to say. Nothing to worry about, no aliens, nothing we cannot identify and mitigate. That was the word. We can mitigate it. Well, frankly, no, you can't. You're not mitigating anything, guys, but that's what they're saying. Those were their words. So I'm just going to say no, 1,000 times no. The people making these claims, they're trying to scare you up for an alien invasion. They have just been plain wrong. Look at the facts. But look at the facts. The current UFO organization of the Pentagon, which gets the award for the most terrible name and terrible acronym in Pentagon history, they've been walking all of this back, and that's AOIMSG, which is an abbreviation for, brace yourself, the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. You know, I honestly think sometimes they are trying to come up with just the worst name for something because they don't want you to know about it, maybe. I think that's probably it. But anyway, that group is the successor to the Navy's UAP task force. So that group, AOIMSG, they are doing everything they can to put this all back to sleep. All right. And in fact, the efforts of the faction, as I often call them, very possibly may have played right into the hands of the establishment, of the real establishment. And it wouldn't be the first time that this type of thing has happened. This happened back in the 1960s when you had a significant UFO wave, an uptick in sightings starting in 1964, 65, really peaking in 66, 67. That led to the establishment of the infamous Condon Committee, the University of Colorado's scientific study of UFOs, which was a rigged game from the beginning. And the conclusion that the Condon Committee, of course, had was, this is not a subject of probative interest for the scientific community. In other words, studying UFOs offers no value to science. Air Force should just drop it, get the hell out. And that was what the Air Force did. They said, thank you very much, Condon, we're out. And so, the interest, the buildup of interest to the UFO subject by the public and by some very motivated people with genuine connections to power, all of that failed. and it just played into the hands of the establishment. It happened again, this facelift to the cover-up, we might say, in the early 1990s, when you had, at that time, Roswell was like really gaining a lot of momentum. Back in the 1980s, in the late 80s, new witnesses of the Roswell event were coming out. There was a lot of very interesting work being done, witnesses being video recorded and all of this. And that led to some sham investigations by the Air Force that gave us more disinformation, you know, the mogul balloon and the crash test dummies and all of that stuff, as another facelift for the UFO cover-up. And it was an instance in which genuine efforts by certain individuals to break this open ended up playing into the hands of the people engaging in the cover-up. And the reason is, I think, the people managing this cover-up are really good at what they do. Plus, they have dominance over media information and disinformation. Welcome to the national security state. So each time the cover-up reached a kind of a crisis point, it got a facelift, and it's getting another one now. And this one updates things really for the 21st century. You know, I think that's all it is. And the facelift essentially brings us back to the early 1950s. And incidentally, NASA, I think about a month ago, announced that they were contracting an independent group for another UAP study. Yeah, don't expect anything out of that. That'll be another Condon report. NASA actually literally said, there's no evidence that UAP are extraterrestrial in any way. So we know where they stand, and I think we know what we're going to expect. So sometime in 2023, presumably those results will be out, and it'll just be, I predict, just, you know, more cold water thrown all over this subject to put it back to sleep, not to scare you up on aliens. It's to put it to sleep. That's what they're planning. That doesn't mean you need to believe them, of course. It doesn't mean that every voice is going to work in concert with them either. But their plan is becoming clear. I have another little slide I'm going to show you here. This is basically the plan. Stop any forward motion of genuine UFO revelations. That's basically it. Why? I ask. Why? Well, because anything else is going to be extremely inconvenient for them. Why is that? Because if they go any further in this, in genuine acknowledgments, they're going to have to deal with two issues that they're not going to want to deal with. That is genuine and confirmed acquisition of ET tech, and yes, possession of aliens, whether living or dead, because that has been an issue for the longest time among legitimate and good UFO research. We've just been pulling this up over the years in countless statements pointing to the fact that some of these craft have come into the possession of the United States military. And they have been studying this. That is significant because that takes the argument well past the point of wondering, gee, maybe there is something out there. No, it's a little bit past that, folks. They've acquired this material and they have hidden the reality. That is a conspiracy. That is a conspiracy. Let's not be afraid of the word. And you've had a long-standing acquisition and exploitation, presumably, and study of exotic technology, and you do not tell the public about it for decade after decade, for generation after generation. What else are you going to call it but a conspiracy? All right? Don't be afraid of the word. And then, in addition to that, I mean, that's just the bare bones scratching of the surface of the reality of what stands behind the true UFO situation. Then you've got possession of aliens in some way or another. These stories, let's call them stories, but some of them are believable in my view. We've been hearing them for decades. Well, it's not outrageous to think that it could be true. And if that is true, that is a huge thing. And by the way, I mean, I continually get such confirmation, or at least strong indications from people that I trust on this matter. So, and again, I'm not even remotely the only person. So that's the situation. That must be stopped. From their point of view, that must be stopped. Not from my point of view, presumably not from your point of view, but from the point of view of those people who still have the real power. There is no way that they are going voluntarily to allow that information to leak out. And the reason for that is that there is too much going on right now that, from their point of view, must not be threatened. In fact, I pulled up a slide here. Let me just pull this up here. This is from another lecture I gave, I can't remember, not long ago. But this really speaks to it. What does this establishment want? Well, they're going to stall on UFO disclosure indefinitely. If they can do it for another 5 years, they'll do it. If they can do it for 50 years, they'll do that. What they are moving toward, and what they are rapidly achieving, breathless speed here, is a genuine global totalitarianism, called a digital dictatorship. We've seen it all for the last 2.5 years, going into high gear, of course. Digital control over speech, over the expression of ideas, over your physical movement, over your employment, over entertainment, over everything, over information. And, when people talk about fascism, frequently, I think they don't get it. It's not about a cult of personality. It's not about some dictator pounding his fist on a podium. It's not what fascism is. Fascism can be bureaucratic, and in fact, it's much more bureaucratic than anything else. It's technocratic. You don't need a cult of personality. All you need to do is just distract the hell out of people with fun and games and BS news, and you got them. And, make sure you don't educate them. Okay, case closed. There's no more of a need from their point of view, I think, with coming AI revolution, nanotech, automation, for a truly industrialized middle class, which was the case a couple of 100 years ago, which did require the allowance of certain freedoms for those people. If you wanted them to produce money and make new inventions and whatnot, you had to give them some freedom, and that was allowed. Well, middle class is no longer, in my view, seen as a necessary thing. And without that, why do you need to give the people freedom? We can see it's all happening. I've called this the fourth stage of humanity, and we are indeed moving toward it. So, oh yeah, and then the last bullet here. What's the real goal? Oh, for the people who've got the means, they want to rock and roll all night and party every day. That's what they've always wanted to do. They want to live forever, have unlimited luxury, and basically genetic superiority and immortality and anything else they get along those lines. So that's what they want, and that's the revolution. We're seeing it come into place. There has never been a moment in world history ever that comes close to what we are seeing now in terms of the scope of a genuine global revolution. All right? Many people, I think, are not recognizing it for what it is. This is a global, top-down, elite-driven and directed revolution against the people to organize human society in a way that basically makes it mimic a giant anthill, in which you're, telepathically or digitally connected to the cloud. Everything that you do will be monitored for the rest of all time, and your kids and your grandchildren, and that's it. End of story. Micromanaged human reality. And they may give you some fun in the meta, in your virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever. But real world, no. As far as they're concerned, that's done. Digital currency will control your spending even more. And that's what is the plan. How can we not see this? I think people more and more are seeing it. And so when you're in the middle of a revolution like that, I'll tell you the last thing that is going to be permitted is for the revolutionary leaders, 2-3 years in, to say, oh, hold on, people, let's stop for a second and assess. Have we been stepping on too many toes? Have we taken too many of your rights away? Oh my goodness, we didn't mean to do that. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That'd be like asking Mao Zedong a couple of years into his revolution to just say, oh no, yeah, let me just rethink everything, folks. No, it's not how it works. This revolution is moving forward, and the people running it are, if they have their way, they are not going to allow anything to stop them. You got a lot of conventional political analysts out there right now, and they are like, well, the people are pushing back. Okay, the people are pushing back. That's true. And maybe there'll be dramatic midterm elections in the United States and maybe somewhere else in Europe, or Europe is a done deal, but that's a whole other story. Will the people push back? Well, I don't think the people are going to be permitted that much leeway to push back. And, on my website, I don't usually like to make predictions, but I have been predicting for the second half of this year, maybe in the next few months, some kind of significant false flag event. And something significant enough to really do a mind job on the public. And I would love to be wrong, and I hope that I am wrong. This is not any inside info. No one's giving me any information. This is me looking at the situation as it has evolved, as I think it is likely to continue. And yes, I think that we're looking, we've seen psyops and false flags all along, but I'm talking something big, something significant that will keep the revolution moving forward. So let us hope that doesn't happen. And if it does, let's be able to identify it. So, and here's the other thing that works against us, frankly. Our culture no longer supports genuine truth-based research. And what do I mean by that? I mean that our culture is by now so fractured. It seems to me that the power elite have concluded, basically, as long as they control the police, the surveillance system, and have the fig leaf of authenticity provided by big media, including big tech, legacy media, all of that, then they don't really, they think they don't have to worry about alternative narratives too much. They do worry about alternative narratives, but they've got their way of dealing with it. We're at a point here in which alternative narratives are an inevitability anyway. I think they've resigned themselves to that. So what they have to do simply is come up with ways of dismissing alternative narratives in whatever way is most convenient. So step one, you label it, misinformation. Step two, disinformation. Russian disinformation is a good one. If that doesn't work, call it extremist content. And if that doesn't work, call it, hate speech. And if that doesn't work, just go on and deplatform and defund and get into their bank account like Trudeau did with the truckers in Canada earlier this year, or like PayPal does, and like, all the financial institutions increasingly are doing. They've got their tools. It's very difficult to fight them. And once a digital currency comes on board, it's going to be tough. So now, why am I saying all this? I'm talking about UFOs, and I'm coming back to it now. I'm saying it because the UFO reality is one of several factors that are still, even now, potentially dangerous to that global revolution. That's why they have to be managed so carefully. That is one important reason why all this is being carefully walked back. And it's difficult to walk back some of the UFO info because, frankly, a lot of powerful information did come out over the last couple of years, but it's very carefully being walked back. We can see it. So that's one area that's got to be contained. Oh, yes. But pushback has got to be managed from a lot of different places right now. And that pushback cannot be tolerated by the elites. One, obviously, how do I put this? The jab. All right. In a normal functioning society, there would be, and has been actually, some highly vocal pushback on that. And whatever your opinion on it is, like, I don't care. It's fine. For the sake of purpose of this discussion here, whatever you decide on that is fine. But the fact is, whatever you think about it, you have to recognize there's been tremendous pushback against coercion on, we'll say, the jab. All right. And all of that continues even to this day, is still largely suppressed. There are some voices, even on YouTube, of all places, that talk about it, and of course the other platforms. But it's still, I would say, very much suppressed. Excuse me. Another thing that cannot be permitted is genuine discussion on the economic disaster that is staring us all in the face. All right. That really started with the COVID lockdowns. Let's face it. And there's not going to be permitted conversation on the motivations for those lockdowns. Not going to happen. Because to do that, because you have a lot of angry people. If you allow people to have all of their opinions expressed on that No, no, no. That's going to be way too much pushback, and that will implicate the entire global order. All right. That's just on the economic level. And then, of course, you have the pushback on the massive increase in state power that has accrued over individuals over the last couple of years. You realize we are seeing the official death of genuine adherence, of open adherence to principles of freedom and liberty by Western governments. They're giving it up. When do you hear any Western leader use the word liberty? All right. They talk about safety. They talk about order. All right. This is an official pivot. And the pushback against that from the people is significant, but is being stifled and will continue, I think, to be stifled if these people get their way. I could go on. So the UFO cover-up remains something that is potentially of great danger to this system, to this revolution. All right. Let me come back to that. If the UFO reality were ever to come out in any meaningful way, right? So if you have a genuine, like, disclosure, we'll say, the government says, yes, aliens are here, they're here. Well, how long do you think before, there are still a few reasonable minds out there? I mean, yes, most of the world turn into, zombies that have had worms eat their brain, but there's still a few people out there. How long would it be before reasonable minds ask openly, well, if you've been hiding the reality of genuine aliens, what else have you been hiding? It's not an outrageous thing to imagine that question. And it's worth asking, what else has been hidden? How deep does this go? How deep does the UFO reality go? That's something that is never really, it's not ever explored. Even among UFO researchers, it's very unusual, and it certainly never happens in the major mainstream culture. But how deep does it go? And this is a slide I created. This is not exactly relevant to what I was saying, but close. These are fallback positions, or let's say levels of disclosure. And I do apologize, the text is kind of small, and if you're looking at this on a phone, good luck with that. But essentially, what these are positions that the establishment can continually fall back to relating to disclosure. Let me take my my head off of this, and you can maybe see this a little bit better. So, the official people can say, well, yeah, we've had a few encounters with these things over time, actually, yeah. But we don't know what's going on. They can say that for a while. Some UFOs may have come from elsewhere, but we don't know anything about them. They can maybe say that. That allows them to keep the cover-up in place. You get to a red line where they have to admit, yeah, we have recovered some craft and some bodies. But then you can guarantee they'll say, yeah, but we haven't made any progress. We still don't understand it. But that's a dangerous point, because that admits lying. That admits a cover-up. And then from there, how far does it go? Are abductions real? Well, I think they're real. If they're real, that's a significant thing to come to. Has there been infiltration? Are they walking among us? I mean, I don't know that this is the case, but people have been wondering about this for the longest time. And if there's truth to that, then, well, we're talking about a very significant problem where suddenly the entire controlled narrative that has been, pre-chewed and spoon-fed to us for many, many years is going to be genuinely in danger of those people losing control of that narrative. So I don't think there's going to be any motivation for that. And especially now, when the revolution is of prime importance. They want to finish this revolution and complete total digital control of the entire global population. That's having some problems right now. All right. And that gets me to some more immediate reasons why the Pentagon is going to continue its walk back of UAP. One reason is, in the first place, if you acknowledge actual aliens right now, that might make selling the current war against Russia a little more difficult. Think about this, all right? Remember Ronald Reagan's famous speech to the United Nations. He says, I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. Now, Reagan said that a number of times. At the UN, it was 1987 when he said that. And, you know, it's a fair question to ask. Is it true? Would the world, you know, work together to fight an alien threat? Maybe the world wouldn't. We do a great job at, you know, screwing up really good opportunities here. But here's the thing. It could actually be asked by a number of people, like, holy crap, you got an alien threat here. What are you doing with this war? We've got other things to deal with. I think there's much more interest in hiding the reality of an alien presence. This allows the crazed neocons running American policy right now to continue their utter, I consider it insanity, in promoting the war going on in Ukraine. And make no mistake, that war happened because of them. I've had a number of things I've said on my website about this, but that war has happened because of the American neocons over the last decade and more, who have made this happen. More than a decade in their making. Their policy explicitly, and it's backfiring, by the way, big time. Big time. So, and that's going to be another thing on which pushback cannot be allowed. All right, this is going to be huge because Europe, in its utter political servitude and idiocy, has just not just shot itself in the foot, but probably in the head. Europe is screwed now. They're screwed. And there are going to be significant repercussions in this in terms of food and energy, all for the rest of this year and all next year. And so, again, this is going to be another instance in which widespread public unhappiness is not going to be permitted. Now, this may all come to a head and some big, big changes may happen, but I'm putting my money, not that I want, but I think that the totalitarians have got all the cards here. They've got the guns, they've got the digital control, they've got the media working in lockstep with them. And, you know, they're all backed by the crazed American neocon ideologues who are running American policy and doing it obviously very much in lockstep with the Davos crowd, the Bilderberg people, all of that, yeah. And they're bringing the world to a major slow-mo car crash. We're watching it all happen. It's a good question to ask, and I don't have the answer here. Is this by design or is this by mistake? Is this just American hubris and arrogance that has pushed this war that is going to backfire, is backfiring, and will continue to in the worst way for them? And will that effectively ruin the unipolar hegemonic vision that really, you know, dominated the West from the end of the Cold War, from the 1990s, when the Western powers assumed, you know, China will be an economic satellite, Russia will just break it into lots of little mini republics. Yeah, well, none of that happened. None of that happened. And what we're seeing instead is a clear de-dollarization process and an economic, just catastrophic effects on the West, which I also predict are going to result in more repression, not more freedom, more repression against people, unfortunately. Unless there's a level of pushback beyond what is being seen now. And if that happens, then wonderful, wonderful. We need it. There's got to be pushback, but I don't know. I think we're going to see some false flags, and we're going to see some serious moves by the establishment against all kinds of open inquiry. The UFO subject will be one of those. I've been saying this for a while now. Dissent will be crushed as much as necessary. From the position of the political elites in the West who are running this global revolution, the die has been cast. All right. There are all kinds of threats to the maintenance of that revolution. UFO disclosure is definitely one of them. And it's not going to be permitted. Now, I'll say one last thing about the false flag of an alien invasion. I believe this for a while. I don't think there's going to be one, but if there ever is, an announcement that the aliens are here to take over, then I would say look for a false flag. If there's an open acknowledgement coming from these people, I'm going to change my tune and say, yeah, I don't believe it. But right now we haven't seen that. We're seeing a faction, and that faction's being pushed back, and the toothpaste is being pushed back into the tube, and not just with the UFO phenomenon. No, it's happening with pretty much everything. And this is why I think it's important to recognize that the UFO subject is indeed integrated into the larger global geopolitical realities here, in terms of the necessity from their point of view of a cover-up. And this is the one thing, if I would just speak to other researchers or the alternative side of things, if you're not looking at the UFO phenomenon, you are missing a significant portion of what is going on in this world. And I realize, there's a lot of resistance that a lot of those people have to looking into this, because there's still the stigma. They still are afraid. But I'm just going to tell you, stop being afraid. Look into this. This is a significant reality. It's more than a significant reality. It is a huge part and an unspoken part of the reality of this world. I have been talking now for some time about the massive number of UFO sightings that take place around the world every single year, thousands and thousands. The last time I tried to estimate it of good sightings every year, I concluded it's a minimum of 40,000 good UFO sightings every single year around the world. The reason I think it's probably much higher, it could be double that easily. But, unfortunately for us, we're in a situation where the UFO reporting infrastructure is just essentially garbage. We don't have anything close to what we need to have in terms of getting the required data necessary to really to study this, really to analyze, to truly crunch the data. We get, some decent number of reports, raw reports from North America, and that's about it. Other reports come in from other parts of the world, yes, but nothing systematic. We need numbers. We need data. We need to understand what is being seen, where, what time of day, and so forth. I've been trying to do this over at my site and occasionally here on YouTube, but not enough of it's being done. We are allowing ourselves to be outmatched by this phenomenon. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. We need to get on top of this. So that means UFO researchers need to start looking more carefully at the grand scope of what's happening and the implications thereof. And, to try to get a handle on what is actually happening. And then on top of that, we need to be much more vocal about recognizing the threats of ongoing UFO secrecy as part of the larger picture of what is happening all around us in the world, this global revolution, this digital dictatorship that is absolutely being implemented around the world, everywhere you look. So we got to get our game together here. We got to get on it. That's all I got for you today. I hope you've found it interesting. And I'll be back. I don't do YouTube as often as a lot of other YouTubers do, but I'm still here. I still like to do these. If you are interested in what I do go to my website, Richard Dolan Members. I produce a lot of content over there. My wife Tracy and I put together basically a monthly newsletter. We've got a large newsletter subscription out there. You can go to our website, Richard Dolan Members, and just click for the newsletter subscription. I would recommend that. We just put one out about a week ago. And it gives an update of everything that I've been up to, that we've been up to. If you like what I've done on what I do here on this channel, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, help me with the algorithm, all of that stuff. You know what to do. I want to thank everyone who's been here in the chat room, the chat family. Always good to see you. I want to thank you for super chats and for all of your support. It means a lot to me, and it helps me to be able to keep doing the things that I do. So I'm very grateful for that. And that's it. I want to thank you all for being here with me. Catch you all again soon. Let's keep our chin up, and let's keep fighting the good fight. Later.